We are taking a look at misinformation and disinformation. According to a UNESCO global survey, 87% of respondents fear disinformation can influence elections in their countries. In Ghana, institutions such as the NCCE have had a cause to worry about the dangers of this phenomenon. Is our democracy being jeopardized by this? Public trust in credible institutions are waning. How worried should we be in dealing with disinformation and misinformation with just 11 days to go to the 2024 elections? Now we look at this pertinent issue. Joining us via Zoom this morning is Caroline Anipa. She's team lead, Center for Media and Digital Literacy, also a communication and media consultant. Caroline, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Great. So we're talking about disinformation and misinformation. I'm actually looking at some statistics or data that you've put together, which is I think a survey you did, and it gives us details on the trends, the format, what to do and all that. But you first give us a brief on how severe the issues of misinformation and disinformation is in the Ghana case, and then we begin from there.
Okay. So once again, good morning, and thank you for having me. Good morning to all of our viewers and listeners. I think that we need to start with understanding what we mean by misinformation and disinformation, because I believe a lot of the time we use those words and some of our viewers and audiences may not really understand it and why we spend a lot of time talking about them. So when we say misinformation, we're basically talking about information that is false but shared without the intention to cause harm. So you may not know that whatever you're sharing is false, but then you're sharing it out of concern for a loved one, or just so that others are also aware of what you believe is going on. Disinformation, which for me and for a lot of media experts around this time is critical to look at, is false information. That is information that is deliberately created. Whoever is creating it knows that it is false, yet they sit in their little room or wherever, create it, and then share it with the intention to cause harm, to sway public opinion, to influence people's behaviors. And so a lot of effort is put into creating this information, so it's not just a mistake that somebody makes. And all over the world, we've seen that disinformation tends to influence behaviors, tends to impact people's democracies. When we talk about COVID-19, when we talk about elections that have happened globally, there have been instances where there's a clear evidence that people have been influenced by disinformation that we may have encountered. In Ghana, since I started paying attention to the trends when it has to do with disinformation, we've noticed that sometimes people are unsure about how to consume information, what to do with the numerous information they come across, because they actually do not trust the information anymore because of the belief that there's disinformation. And then also people's behaviors are influenced. When we are getting into an election, people are confused about what they're hearing. I think that we're going to talk about the Wuntumi FM case, right? If you were a listener of that radio station and you heard what was propagated there, you'd be very confused and you wouldn't know what to do, right? And so disinformation in Ghana is a big issue that we are beginning to pay, and I'm happy that all of us are beginning to pay a lot of attention to.
Well, I want to look at, it's just 11 days to go, and you mentioned the Wuntumi case, but before we get into that, the nitty-gritty of that issue, what would you say that disinformation and misinformation, now that we know the clear differences between the two, have some effects on voter outcomes, electoral outcomes?
So I think that is yet to be proven. You need to do a lot of research to say that this is the precise impact that it has had on people. But when you do speak with people in their little corners, they say that, yes, they are not entirely sure about their voting behaviors or what to do because of the information, the disinformation that they come across. And again, like I said, if you speak with somebody who probably does not know better or is unable to verify the information, who might have heard the Wuntumi FM case, they would be confused about what to do with information during the elections. And that might even impact their ability to or interest in voting.
Right. Ben will come in shortly, but I mean, just to give some context, I remember about 2 years ago, I did some work for Pen Plus Bytes on misinformation and disinformation, where we had focus groups and so on. And there emerged that young people, the challenge there is they do not check information before they share. And I think that is where the critical issue is, because once you share that information without checking and, ensuring that it is the fact that you're sharing, then you're also spreading it. What would you say we can do as people, not just as media persons, but individuals, to curtail the spread of misinformation and disinformation?
Okay. So I think that it's not just a problem with young people, it's a problem with all of us. There is so much information out there. I think probably the people that we may want to exempt most of the time is the media, because it's their responsibility to ensure that whatever information they're putting out there is verified. So all of us are guilty at one point or the other of sharing information without verifying. That again is because of the volume of information that we are having to deal with day in and day out. So again, when it comes to dealing with whatever information you're seeing, wherever, I think that the very first thing for you to know is that today you cannot just take every information you come across at face value. Even when we talk about the media ownership influences the kind of information that you hear on a particular radio station. We are listening to Joy. If you listen to Radio Gold, if you listen to Oman FM, Wuntumi FM, you realize that whatever information they put out there is tilted in a certain direction, and sometimes that is influenced by the media ownership and then the business model of the media. So know that information does not come at it's not valueless. The values attached to it, and that is influenced by many different things. And so, and then also we should be aware that when we are looking at headlines, we need to go beyond the headlines, basically, right? Know that sometimes headlines are just meant to catch your attention, and then it's when you go into the details of it that you would find the right information. So the very first thing you do when you come across every information is for you to stop, stop, think a little, reflect, ask yourself who is sharing this information, why are they sharing it, what is their source of information, and do I even need to share it, right? And you need to do this especially when whatever message you're coming across invokes some very strong, emotions, right? Because bad actors, disinformers know that when people are extremely happy, extremely sad, or made extremely angry by a certain message, they are more likely to either share it in opposition or in support of that information. So always stop first, and then also investigate further. I mentioned a number of media stations. Some of us are so attached to specific radio or television stations and their social media platforms that we do not diversify. So we are hooked there. So we are in a filter bubble. So we don't even know what's going on in somewhere else. So it's important for us to, diversify our sources, cross-check with other sources to find out what they're also saying about whatever message you're coming across. And then also we need to, sift our sources. Yeah, I mentioned cross-checking our sources and then tracing whatever your message you're getting to the original source. So let me just use the Wuntumi story again as an example. So the gentleman said that the EC now has two or more dates for the election, and on day one, this is what is happening, day two. So he's categorically mentioned the EC. So if you come across such information, a message, the first thing you do is, the EC said this, right? So you need to trace the message to the EC. We know the EC has a social media handles. Yeah. We know it has a website, right? So go onto the EC platforms and then check for yourself. You can call their call center. I hope the call centers are working, especially as we are getting into the elections. So you can call the call centers if you're not able to, you can also check with trusted media houses. So always trace whatever message you're seeing to the original source. And that's very important to us also as media, because we are in an era where media houses are just cross-publishing without checking the sources of the information.
Right.
So this is a critical moment for media houses. So also always trace to the original source.
Thank you. And right before Ben comes in, you talked about the idiosyncrasies in the reportage of various media houses, based on who owns them and all that. Aside diversification, like you mentioned, should we be looking at some reforms to curb this menace? Policy reforms, maybe.
I think that's a discussion that has been had several times on various platforms. And I know that the NMC, the National Media Commission, is doing a lot, but there is so much more to be done, especially when there's clear evidence that some media houses are not, they're not in the media business, right? They're just there to push the agenda of their owners.
Yeah. And
that is tainting the entire reputation and hard work of credible media houses like Joy FM, Multimedia, and the others there. Right. So there is so much more to be done. When media houses are caught in the unprofessional act, what happens at the end of the day? Are they left off the hook? Are they made scapegoats, examples for others to follow? What is the repercussion for being unprofessional, right? So if we come to the realization that there's no punishment, we'll keep doing it. It's like having a child. You don't scold your child for any wrongdoing. They become messed up. That's what happens.
And Ben, hopefully this is some of the gaps that the broadcasting bill, if passed into law, can fix for us. But over to you.
Exactly, and that was one of the things. Caroline, two very quick things. So first, do you think, of course, there's media freedom of speech on the one end, but we know of entities that are clearly political, that, like you mentioned, we know the ownership and people can do whatever they like, both in the print and in the, TV and radio media entities. Should we get to the point where maybe we weed out some of such entities? What is your take on that? Brief thoughts.
Okay, so how do we weed them out?
Well, I think it is clear enough. Yeah. It is clear enough with what we see, don't we? I mean, I always say that there are some papers, for example, you can, any story on any given day, you can pick that same story. You know that X paper will approach it from this end and Y paper will approach it from the other end.
Yeah. So that it's easy to say, yes, let's clear them out. But then again, I ask, how do we clear them out? Because whilst clearing them out, you also do not want to censor the media. So we need to have clear guidelines on how to do this. And some people would say that let's use laws. So there is the Electronic Communications Act, which I believe the police was what the police applied in arresting the gentleman who spread that false disinformation on Untumi FM. But when it comes again to laws in Ghana and in a lot of other countries and weeding unprofessional organizations out, a lot of people are a bit wary because with our history, we know that laws and measures like what we are discussing can be used to censor media and also get rid of opponents. So yes, it's important to ensure to get those who are not practicing professionally out, but it is the power of it that we need to pay attention to so that we do not curtail people's freedom to express themselves.
And I agree with you, but we've moved from one extreme where people were muzzled to another extreme where people can say practically anything, including nonsense and false information, and it goes on. I believe that's the gentleman Oheneba speaking in the background. Okay, so we'll get that footage when it's ready. But you also made mention of something, and I just want to take you back to that. There are some people who are not on social media, who don't even have smart gadgets. So, for example, this Untumi, radio person who says this thing. For them, they hear it on radio and that's it. They are probably not watching TV. There are people like that, and they are not on smart gadgets. How do such people sift through? For them, what happens?
That's very important, and it's one of the challenges that I've had with disinformation, media literacy efforts in Ghana over the years. We tend to be quite focused on those that are on the digital platforms, and then leave out those that are offline. But then we know that in Ghana and in a lot of West African countries, radio is the most accessible form of media, and it's actually one of the most trusted sources of information. And so when such information messages go down, how do we ensure that people down there hear it? And that's where what we are doing here today comes in, right? So on platforms like yours, this is TV, so I know that on your radio platform as well, Joy FM, you have discussions like this where you educate your listeners about how to deal with false information when they come across them. But then again, for the civil society actors like the Center for Media and Digital Literacy, we need to go to the grassroots, ensure that we are talking directly to the people who are, who may be targets of messages like the gentleman shared, because you and I would not believe it, but somebody somewhere would not know it. So we need to take some of our interventions offline. We take it offline so that people down there also get to know about it. Traditional media also has to help in that direction because you have the platform and you have the reach.
I mean, here in Africa, also in the UK, the US, France, misinformation, disinformation has been used in electoral settings. Now, when you think of Ghana, we're on the cusp of another election. What goes into electoral misinformation, or in fact, let's focus on disinformation in terms of elections? What are we to look out for?
Okay, so based on elections that have been held, I'll talk specifically about Ghana. Can you go back to my first, I think the second slide, we talked about the trends.
The one about the trends, yeah.
Yes.
All right, so at least what I see there, which I can read out for you before you get there.
Yes, don't worry, I can speak to them.
Okay.
So based on what we've seen in other countries and what we saw in 2020, third slide, please.
So we are looking at the one that says trends for disinformation. Yes, that's where we are.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's often a lot of false information about the electoral process, and the Wontumi FM case is the classical. I was thinking to myself last night that in all of my years monitoring electoral disinformation, I'd never come across anything like that.
Me neither. I was shocked.
How can someone sit down confidently on radio and spread such falsehoods? So there's a lot of that. Getting into the election period, like the period that we are in, talking just confusion about the process, where to find your polling stations and the rest. And then on the D-Day, you find a lot of false information about vote rigging, polling stations that have been moved, ballot boxes that have been snatched, that kind of information. Then also, around this time that we're in, you'll see a lot of false information about party manifestos, about policies, about crowd sizes. I saw some videos and images on social media, and then they're saying that party has such a big crowd they're going to win. And some of them are actually not, related to this election. They're from elsewhere or they're from previous years, right? And the last one, which I think is very important to me, and which I was particularly paying a lot of attention to getting into this election, was imposter content, right? That is, I think you played some of that video before our conversation, but it wasn't elections related.
Right.
So that's when false information is credited to credible people, attributed to credible people, media houses like Joy FM and the rest. Before early this year, there was so much of that, where you see artworks, pictures with logos of Joy FM, with City FM, with so and so, and they're saying that this media house has said that. And we've seen that over the years, that's one way that media houses have been communicating to us. So when you see that, you're bound to believe that it's actually coming from the media house, when in actual sense, it's not, right? So those are some of the things that we've seen over the years. And a lot of them are also, they're also pushed out there with ethnic and stereotypical narratives. So there was one that says that Napo has said Evers and Gans are responsible for all of Ghana's mishaps, right? So that's an imposter content. And they know that in Ghana, much as we talk about being united and all of that, there are also those ethnic tensions. So if I put my message out there and I underline it with such narratives, people are bound to take action or react in a certain way.
I see. Interesting dynamics there. One of the things we've been doing is to put QR codes on some of our flyers nowadays to help. I mean, it's not foolproof, but at least it helps. It adds another layer to guaranteeing that this is from the right source.
Right. And how effective would you say, Caroline, this Cybersecurity Act 2020 is? And even before we get there, I want to stay on the Wontumi case for a bit. I mean, if you talk about digital media proliferation, of course, the content has already been shared. But this is someone sitting in a radio station spewing this disinformation. Would you say was the responsibility of whoever is in the room with this person to bring him to book even before it got out? And then how effective are these cybersecurity acts that we have, would you say?
I think there's a lot of questions to be asked when we consider the Wontumi case, right? Because before, when Kingsley spoke to me about being on this show, and then I told him I would want to show some slides, he said, okay, can you share them with me so I know what you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Right. So that's a serious producer there, right? I'm very certain that if I begin to go overboard, get sensational or say the wrong things, he would stop me, or you guys would find a way of, taking me off air. Right. And I think in the past, there was something about delaying, I forget what it's called. You delay, I don't know, one of you can probably help me. There's this delay measure, said that you hear first what I'm saying before your audience even gets to hear it.
Is that 5 seconds delay in the transmission?
Yeah, I don't know if it's still working. Yeah, but that was one of the measures that was in place to ensure that people online listening to a media platform do not fall prey to any false narrative, right? So I'm wondering, where was the gentleman's producer? Who else was in the room? Because this person, at least one person would have suspected that what he was saying was false. So what happened?
Alternatively, you could ask, or is it that it was agreed that he should do that?
The entire team. That would be so ridiculous. Well,
I mean, because why? And I'm not saying that it is what happened. I'm speculating, but I'm also saying that until some people pointed out to it, which was quite a while after this had happened, the guy was still on air, wasn't he?
Or they just didn't know.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Because here, as I sit here, if you say anything that, before you realize, I mean, apart from the back room, you are getting messages from the top hierarchy and all of that. So I don't know how that could have happened without the system knowing that something like that had happened.
Precisely. So there's a lot of questions to be asked. And that, as we are coming to know, that isn't the only disinformation that has been shared on that platform, right? There's also one where a gentleman says that if you want to vote for the NDC, start by thumbprinting from 1 all the way to 8. And we know that when you do that, that's a spoiled ballot, right? So we obviously need to pay attention to what's going on Wontumi FM. And then on all radio stations, again, that's where our fact checkers come in. I'm happy that there's a Ghana fact-checking coalition. We tend to focus a lot of attention on social media. Right. But then there's so much happening on traditional media, on radio, right? And we know that radio is also very transient. So we need to dedicate a lot of attention and time to radio and legacy media
Right.
getting into this election. And you asked about the
Yes.
Digital Security Act.
Yes.
How many of us know about it? Okay, so again, that's where we need to start the conversation from. So there's a lot of, in Ghana, we have so many laws, so many acts that we do not know about, right? And some of them are also not enforced. So if they're not enforced, you would keep on making the same mistakes. So again, the media, civil society actors, all stakeholders, it's our responsibility to ensure that we make our citizens aware of these acts and then how they work.
I have a quick intervention. AI and deepfake. You mentioned that initially, the videos we showed, those were used for some nefarious medical entities. But the question is, what should people look out for when it comes to AI and deepfake in terms of electoral manipulation? What should people look out for?
Okay. So in Ghana, I think this election is going to be the first that we may have to do with a lot of artificial intelligence and AI generated images and videos. We are currently not very sure how that's going to play out, but it's important that we have some tips at our fingertips. So for those of us on social media especially, we need to know that there are quite a number of AI bots. I believe there was a recent research by one organization that said about 171 bots had been identified on social media, and what they were doing was putting out pro NPP messages, and I think
so when you say bots, you're talking of robots, artificial intelligence.
Robots, yes, precisely robots. And so they're bots on social media, and what they're doing is to create messages, draft messages, put them on social media and amplify them, right? That's their main responsibility. And in this election, we may find them putting out a lot of such information. One way to identify a robot or bot and on social media is to look at their profile, right? So just click on their profile, go and look at the number of followers they have, how old the account
has been in use,
right? So some of them would be created just for the purpose of these elections, right? And then after the elections, they become dormant. So look at their history, right? And when we are talking about AI images also, so far, haven't seen much of that getting into Ghana's elections, but there's been evidence in some other countries that they were used during the elections. So one of the things to look out for, a lot of the AI tools are not very sophisticated, although there are some that are very, very advanced, and you're unable to tell that these ones were, this is AI generated. But some of the tips you can use, look out for body parts if it has to do with human beings. Yeah, if it has to do with human beings, look out for body parts. Sometimes the hands, the feet may look a bit unnatural. You see that someone might have 6 or 7 fingers, and the rest, the feet have melted into another object. When you see a human being wearing earrings or eyeglasses, sometimes the glasses have melted into the skin of the body, right? And then the body parts also sometimes may be disproportionate. Some parts are bigger than the other. One ear might be way, way bigger than the other, right? And then another way to do this is to use some digital tools. So there is you can do a reverse image search. You can use the truemedia.org. So if you're a bit
truemedia.org, one of the places people can go to, truemedia.org, right?
Precisely. If you're a bit tech savvy, just type into your browser truemedia.org, upload the link to whatever you're seeing, and then it can tell you whether it is AI generated or not. Right? Yeah.
And I mean,
yeah, go on.
No, are you done? Because I wanted to inform our audience that what we're showing earlier was some of the articles that were fake, the NPP, NDC group or pages that were asking for money. So our audience know what we were showing them. earlier. And this is the Wuntumi video that you're looking at right now. But Caroline, I'm curious to know, it is the fourth industrial revolution. So do you think that a time will come where, you know, our battles with fake information, you know, disinformation, misinformation, and deep fake videos and all these would come to an end? I'm just out of curiosity.
For now, looking at where we are and how quickly technology is advancing, it's quite unlikely.
So it's here to stay.
Yeah, I think this is a battle we may have to fight for some time. Yeah.
So where does that leave us before Ben comes in? If this is here to stay, where does that leave us?
I think critical thinking, right? Critical thinking, media, digital information literacy, all of us must know how to deal or handle whatever information we come across. There are fact-checking organizations, all right, but they cannot fact-check everything, right, and in a timely manner. So all of us need to know what to do when you see information. Where do you go to cross-check this information? How do you verify images, right? And most importantly, all of us need to know that we need to pause, especially when our emotions are involved. It's the same way we're dealing with anger, right? When you're angry, they say walk away a little. When you're writing an article and you feel it's the best article, they say step away, take a walk, and then come back to it. You'll definitely find some errors. So always pause and reflect a little.
Right, Ben.
Now, I mean, Sweetie, just the same way phishing and other ransomware attacks just keep getting better.
Yeah.
It's the same way, definitely. AI and deepfake, they worry me quite a bit because some of us have fallen victim to it. But I don't know whether you ever saw that Obama video, the deepfake one. And they've done it to many, many people.
Yes.
They are only going to get more and more advanced. Yeah. And so we are going to have to be more and more savvy. Else you could easily misinform. And as for the other one, that would be deliberate. So those are some dangerous things heading into the future. But where do we go from here? Especially as we are this close to an election. I believe the political parties also ought to be very responsible. But sometimes, like you said, bots, robots, they know someone within the party system has done it on different sides. I don't want to mention names, but they know. And it is a part of their campaign strategy. How do we deal with such situations? Name and shame, call people to order. Usually these are faceless, but I'm sure there should be mechanisms to be able to trace down to the root of it. What do you think we can do?
I think that for the political parties, we know that it's a technique that they're using because there's a lot at stake for them. They want to come into power, they want to win. So I would say that they should do the right thing, but we know that that will fall on deaf ears, right? And so the responsibility basically falls back to the media and to civil society organizations and to citizens, right? For us to be a bit more responsible with how we consume information. Naming and shaming. There have been so many instances where fact-checking organizations have named and shamed, right? They've called claims made by politicians false, but they don't appear to be bothered. They repeat the same falsehood on numerous platforms on numerous occasions, and so for them, I just it may sound like a losing battle, but the politicians know what they're doing. For us as citizens, we also need to understand their game and not let them win.
Now, on this bit about legacy media, because in the midst of all of this, there are certain responsible entities that people can still say, okay, there's this information out there. Let me go to Joy News on Facebook, Joy News on YouTube. Is that information there? If it is, then I can attach some credibility to it. But you look at the UNESCO Ipsos ranking, views of people. 66% of respondents trust in news from television, 63% trust news from radio, 61% trust news from the print media. You know my worry? You pick some of these newspapers, they've been in the system for a long time. You can call them legacy media, but they are putting out false information. And you know it. There are TV stations now owned by politicians. They've been there for a long time. They are putting out false information. So, how credible is legacy media?
Big question, big question. Oh, Ben, I think that's a question that you and I would keep asking ourselves.
It's one for the gods,
right?
eh?
For a long time. And again, that's also where government institutions and all of these stakeholders also come in. And that's why we have the RTI, right? So one of the provisions of the RTI is proactive disclosure, right? So and we know that the media, a lot of the times, is reporting what so and so person has said, so and so person from this institution or organization has said. So if those organizations also were disclosing whatever information proactively on their websites or on their platforms, I know that, okay, so I am supposed to verify, cross-check with credible media. I've done that. But then I can also just go straight onto this website of the EC, of the NCC, NCC is in public education, of so and so organization, and I will find the information there. But we are at a point where we don't see proactive disclosure. You request for information, and then there's literally no response from anyone. You send an email, no one responds, you call. And so we need, I think it's actually an overhaul, making sure that all of our institutions are working well. If they're working well, this isn't a conversation we'll be having for this long, A lot goes into it.
You know, Sweetie, yesterday we saw a typical example of that. One of the newspapers, for the sake of being decorous, I will not mention the name. I remember the newspaper. They put out false information in respect of the former president and the Russian oligarchs. You remember that story?
Yes.
I intentionally did it to point to the fact that, and that was their banner headline. And this thing has been, in fact, months back, it came up. So the entity cannot say they don't know that it is false information. They knew. So that was disinformation right there.
Right.
Newspaper, yesterday. I'm just refraining myself from mentioning the name of the newspaper. So it becomes problematic. Another thing is, there are a lot of these newspapers. Of course, there are the legacy media, the Daily Graphic, and all of that, which is why we hold them to higher standards. But there are a lot of new ones now. Again, I will not mention names. About 4 or 5 come to mind. And sometimes all they put out, in fact, a lot of those new ones, I started seeing them this year or from last year. In other words, some of them were also set up maybe by political entities to throw dust in the eyes of people. So it's a huge problem.
My final, okay.
Okay, just to add that indeed that happens, that media, so-called media organizations are set up just around this period. And we've seen that there's a particular one that we saw in 2020. It actually merged the names of 2 fact-checking organizations, Ghana Fact and then Fact Check Ghana, and all this of Ghana Fact Check. And they were purportedly doing fact-checking. At the middle of this year, we saw them again in action, right? And so many other of them happening. Back to that story that you saw in that newspaper about the Russian oligarchs. When we say you should use legacy media as your source of information or to cross-check information, we do not mean that you go to the same kind of media. Let me explain this. So if you are looking at, so Joy FM, Joy has a TV platform, they have radio, they have an online source, and it's the same kind of information you would see. So you need to diversify your source. If you're looking at a newspaper that is aligned to Party A, right, you would come across the same kind of information from Party A. So diversify. Look at what other newspapers are saying, what other television stations are saying. In a day, I can read reports from Joy, from Ghana Web. It's actually gets stories from different sources. But just make sure that you're looking at all of these different sources of information, even when it comes to legacy media. Same way you have to do with social media.
All right. So this will be my final bit, hopefully. So according to the data from UNESCO, 87% of respondents in a global survey fear that disinformation could influence elections in their countries. It's 11 days to Ghana's 2024 elections. Would you say that the case of Ghana is reflected in the survey? I mean, this is your field. You interact with people day in, day out. Would you say that we are part of the statistics? It's accurately reflecting in the case of Ghana?
We are actually part of the statistics because it was a survey of 16 countries and Ghana was one of them. So 16 countries that were voting this year. And so they sampled some respondents, internet users especially from Ghana, and it was their view that disinformation could influence the elections. And when we speak to people, similar sentiments are shared. Okay. We don't want the situation where at the end of the day, people may doubt or rule out the outcome of the elections or may not be able to make the right decision because they fear that they cannot trust any information they come across. So there's so much work to be done in that direction.
Okay.
Right before we go, Caroline, just a short bit to you. One avenue some of these people use to spread false information, interestingly, is bloggers, vloggers, and all of that, with huge followings. Now, people come, and yes, sometimes they are paid, and then they put out this information. For a lot of them, they know the information is wrong, but they are getting paid for it. Maybe from the criminal or the legal perspective, how can we streamline that? That's my final bit to you.
Okay. So it's a business, like you're saying, and for us in the media, I think that the most important thing for us is making sure that our audiences understand that these are paid influencers and they're earning based on your interaction and your engagement and your behavior. And again, it is the responsibilities of our institutions to ensure that, to even know that this is what is happening, right? And ensure that they streamline it. So if somebody is a vlogger, is an influencer, there needs to be an indication, right? That
I mean, should we, for example, have, if someone puts that there, this is paid for content. This is paid content.
Precisely. So right now, if you just get onto your favorite influencers platform, you realize that they're putting information there without any indication that this is paid for, right? But they are paid for. I've seen a number of, some of them, I mean, or Deborah, for instance, would indicate that this is a paid ad. Others are not doing it. So we need to get to that point. And then also the media also needs to get to that point where they are clearly distinguishing straight news stories, opinions, and then paid ads so that their followers, their audiences are able to discern these when they come across them.
Right.
Caroline, it's been good having you. It's been a very fruitful discussion. We're grateful for your time. Caroline Anipa is team lead, Center for Media and Digital Literacy. She's also a communication and media consultant. That's been one interesting conversation.
Yeah, just to conclude by saying that sometimes I see posts and they put hashtag ad, AD. So you know that it is not coming from them. They're just advertising for someone or they've been paid for. So if you see any posts, any content really like that, that should tell you that, you know, the person has been paid to broadcast that. But right before we go, this year's CompuGhana Cashback has been named as Prime Cashback Season. And it's packed with incredible deals and exciting surprises. So this Prime Cashback, CompuGhana is bringing you exclusive discounts, prime savings, and awesome surprises when you shop any products from any of their branches nationwide. You can find products from your favorite brands like Samsung, LG, TCL, HP, Lenovo, Dell, Media, Nasco, Tecno, Infinix, itel, Huawei, and many more. Visit any of CompuGhana branches nationwide and enjoy exclusive discounts on all products. CompuGhana has a wide range of IT-related products. Mobile phones, electronic products like laptops, printers, tablets, television sets, fridges, home theaters, air conditioners, gas cookers, and more. What's more amazing is this year's Prime Cashback with CompuGhana has got great prices with instant gifts and cash prices for your shopping experience. So when you shop at CompuGhana this season, be on the lookout for the surprise team. Answer a question correctly and win instant cash and gifts. You deserve this opportunity too. So rush to CompuGhana now. The promo runs from now till December. So visit www.compugana.com or simply call 0302 752 020 for more information. Then.
Well, they usually say your health is your wealth, and that's why I'd like to introduce you to Medicas Hospital, a modern healthcare facility built with your recovery in mind. They have spacious wards built with your family in mind, a warm and caring pediatric unit built with your children in mind. And they have assembled some of the brightest minds in medicine, led by Dr. Yawasafo, the drive-time doctor, to serve you. Here are some of the medical services they offer. They offer medical services, specialist services in plastic surgery, obstetrics, gynecology, child health, urology, psychiatry, and eye care. But if you thought that was it, no, there's more. They also offer comprehensive medical diagnostic services encompassing the following: endoscopies, medical laboratory services, x-rays, and scans. And if you want top-notch medicine, they have a 24-hour pharmacy ensuring you'll always receive efficacious, safe, and affordable medicine. And they also bring to you the most powerful medicine of all: simple human kindness and empathy. They pride themselves on the highest attainable standards, and they accept all forms of payment, including from private health insurance companies. So all you have to do now is make your way to Medicas Hospital at number 10 Kinso Street near the Ashalebotre School Junction. If you'd like to call them, reach them on 0501 477 340, 0501 477 340. On social media at MedicasGH. Medicas Hospital, a place of healing. Now we're taking a short breather. When we return, we're telling you about that latest Shraj report and what it entails, what it means criminally in terms of liability and otherwise. You want to know about the National Cathedral saga from Shraj? We'll be back with that shortly.